job.
We're calling this meeting to order.
All right.
We have a quorum. Thanks for joining
All right,
us,
what-
Frank.
Yes.
I said
So-
thanks for joining us.
Hey, this is my $400 phone call.
Frank went out and bought, or Rick went out and bought Frank an iPad, but
Sweet.
Frank, sounds like you reimbursed him, huh? So
Yeah, of course. They think I've got too much money, and I tell them I'm broke. So but that's kind of a Varnum trait.
So Tom, how's Florida's one of those hotspot areas. You guys are both in the Florida, California, Arizona hotspot areas. What's the word from Florida?
Yeah, we're, well, Florida is kind of hot, like you say, but we're a little worse here in Pinellas County because this is retirement city, retirement county. And we've got like twice as many deaths as they have over in Hillsborough, who's got twice the population.
I don't
So-
understand all that. I
Well,
live in a community of approximately 8,600 geezers. And of the 8,600, I think there's, well, the only reports I get is from our local paper, and I think there's probably less than 10 cases, maybe less than 5 cases in here.
It's because the old folks are staying home.
well,
No, they don't stay home. They're homeless running around. Hell, these old folks are active. But they do wear a mask, but I don't know whether that does any good or not. But I don't think they get out amongst everybody else as much as other people do. They kind of confine it to this little mile square area.
Gotcha.
Now, are you on any kind of a lockdown in your area there, Frank? You can come and go as you please, right?
Lockdown? This is goddamn United States. This ain't China.
Paul, I don't know how many minutes we are in, but kind of note that because that needs to make.
Yeah, I saw that. Duly noted. Hey, what is the backdrop this week?
Oh, I'm surprised nobody's mentioned it. Really.
I just did.
Okay. It's an Afghan that Mom crocheted for me many, many years ago.
I have one very similar.
Yep.
Very similar.
I think we
Jeff
had one
posted-
like that. Maybe Marlene's mother, her aunt made it. Then I remember Grandma Reisler used to make those rugs where you braided stuff together and
Oh, the
made it
rag
in a
rugs.
circle.
Yeah, rag
Oh,
rugs.
yeah, rag rugs. Yeah.
rag rugs. She used to make a lot of them back when she first was, I think, moved into town. She had to have something to do, so she made those rag rugs.
Well, every time I remember going to the place out in the country, the Grandma Rice's place, she always had balls of rags everywhere in the house. Every room you went into, there was a ball of rags.
Do you guys remember going to Uncle George and Aunt Rosie's house?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I've been doing a little research on the Kleins, and Sarah Schwartz and Nicholas Klein came to the United States in 1871. They got married in South Bend, Indiana in 1871. And I think probably in 20 years or thereabouts, they owned a farm in Poweshiek County. So, and I imagine they left Germany penniless because I don't think they were of the money class. So that farm that they owned was the one where George and Rosie owned later on.
Okay. So, and they made their
Was that-
living farming. That's
What?
how they made their living farming. That's how
Yeah,
they made.
yeah, they
Oh,
were
yeah.
farmers, had about 10 kids. And your Grandma Reisler she was born in 1885, so she was probably in the middle or probably later in the family probably in the middle of the family. And your Grandpa Reisler was 20 years older than her, and they got married when she was about 18 or 19, and he was about 38 or 39.
And Rosie had polio, right? And that's
Yeah, when she was a
Yeah.
child.
hmm
And
their house was a white ranch. Is that what I remember?
yeah, but that wasn't the house that was there when the Nicholas and Sarah lived there. They built or some way got a different house.
Gotcha.
But anyway, I like to tell people too that my grandmother Reisler, your great grandmother, had 7 kids, all probably born in her bed with a doctor or a midwife attending, and every one of them lived to be senior citizens. Going through the big flu epidemic in the 20s, 18 to 20, and they all lived to be senior citizens. So it's quite an achievement.
I was born in that farmhouse too, Frank. Did you know that?
You were?
On the Reitzler farm. Yeah, right. That's where I was born.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Why
Don was born in a hospital, and I don't know where were you in Toledo?
I was
maybe?
born in Tama. I think one of them farmhouses in Tama. I thought you were born in a hospital someplace.
No, I was born on a farm.
So do you know, Tom, do you know, did you just happen to be there when Grandma went into labor, or was Grandma going into labor so Grandpa took her out there so that great grandma could help? Or how do you know how you ended up being born there?
I have no idea. I have no recollection.
Well, when Tom was born, Mom and Dad had 2 kids. One was a year old, the other was 2 years old. And
Right.
they probably had their hands full. Dad, if I know Dad probably needed all the help he could get.
Yeah, that was busy years. They were almost as busy as Ruth and I. Yeah.
I also got from your dad all the notes on the farm that Dad inherited, the abstracts, which are the real estate records from when the guy bought it from the state. Well, actually, when Iowa got it from the federal government, and then the guy bought it from the state of Iowa, and he sold it to William Varnum in 1865. You might have those records. Do one of you guys have those records from your dad?
I don't.
I don't have anything.
I do have them from.
Anyway, Dan was thrilled with all those, and Marcy has scanners, so we're going to take all that file and scan it and put it on disc, and we'll send you guys a disc. It's quite interesting reading. Great grandfather William bought the farm in 1865 for $1,575, I think. That was $10 an acre.
Wow.
And they bought it for $150 down. And he financed the guy who held the mortgage. That was $1 an acre, what they paid to buy that farm in 1865. And the previous owner held the mortgage on the rest of it.
And so just take that. It was, what'd you say? How much down and how much total?
Total was $1,575.
Okay. And how much was your house on Hazelbrook when you bought it?
$14,100.
$14,100 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Southern California.
Right.
And Tom, how much was your house in
Malcolm?
In Grinnell?
Oh, in Grinnell, I think we paid $9,500 for the house we lived in Grinnell.
So Denise and I's first house was $62,000. I'm just thinking about the 1,500 to $10,000 to $62,000 to our kids.
Well, you want to hear a good story?
Kirsten, what was Brianna's house that they just bought? Probably I mean, you can't buy a house almost anymore for less than $250,000.
Right.
I paid 70 for this one, but it's been a while ago.
Well, the first house we bought in Malcolm, we paid, I think, $3,500. It was $70 a month payment.
70.
Well, ours at $14,000 when we bought it. It was like $105 a month payment. Got a 4% FHA loan. Yeah, but Micheline's mother and father bought their house in Seal Beach. It was about a mile and a half from where I live. And about 50 years ago, they paid $35,000 or $39,000 for it.
Ooh.
But she sold it a couple months ago for $905,000.
That's what I
Wow.
call capital gains.
Are you got any of you guys interested in genealogy? I've got the family history, the family tree from Stephen on down to today. Got it on the computer. If you guys are ever interested in genealogy, I can
Yeah,
send you
who's
that.
Stephen? He's
Stephen was George's father.
oh, from England or Wales? Was
Yeah,
he from Wales or
Stephen
England?
was George's father. He he was in some city, the big city in England. I forget what the name of it is now.
It wasn't Wales though. It was England.
It was England, yeah. It's on the west. It's on the east coast of England.
Oh,
But before I forget, as you mentioned Clark, I just have to say, and maybe I've told you guys before, but when I was up in Mason City, I was riding in the elevator with a guy, and I always talked to patients and visitors that were on the elevators and stuff, and I just would say, you know, hey, how you doing? And talked to this gentleman and told him my name, and he said, did you ever know, or did you know Clark Varnum? And I said, I never knew Clark, but he was my dad's cousin. And he said, boy, he was the smartest man I ever knew. He was this, you know, and I know you guys have talked about, and this was, you know, I mean, this was some guy on an elevator who knew Clark when he was, you know, a young man, obviously, because he died at a young age. But the first thing, when he heard the name Varnum, the first thing that came to his mind was how smart Clark Varnum was. It was just kind of funny.
yeah.
When he was 8 or 9 years old, he was doing photography, you know, developing pictures and enlarging them and stuff like that.
Wow.
He was a genius. He graduated from Iowa State. Then he got a scholarship, Fulbright scholarship, and went to Germany for a year or two studying physics. And then he came back and he was working on the doctorate program at Princeton. He came home at Christmas time, and going back, he got killed in the automobile accident when I don't know how old he was, probably 25 or thereabouts. And he had all his work completed for his doctorate. He just hadn't published it and presented it to the committee yet.
And driving a Volkswagen, right?
But he would have, had he lived another 6 months to a year, he would have had his doctorate in physics from Princeton University. But he was a genius. There's no question about it. Tom and I grew up with him. He was the same age as Tom within a month or two.
Yeah, his birthday was in August.
When we were riding our bikes no-handed and playing baseball, him and his dad were developing pictures, or he built a telescope to study the planets and ham radio.
Yeah, he was a ham radio, right?
Yeah.
His call sign was W0HST, Harry S. Truman.
Oh, and he was also
Yeah, good liberal. Yeah.
developing pictures. I mean, it's just unreal what he was moving from one thing to the next.
But okay, so I have another question. When I did not realize this until just actually yesterday talking to Frank again when I was, when I know that when Grandpa went to the war, to World War II, you three boys were like 7, 8, and 9 or something like that.
Well, that was 44. So
I was 7 years old. I was 7. He went in at 43 to 45. He was just short of 2 years.
So you just think about being, you know, somebody going away for war and leaving Grandma at home with 3 kids, 7, 8, and 9. And, but then I didn't realize that your brother that died within a few days of birth, was it Robert?
Yeah, John Robert.
John Robert. Yeah. Wasn't born until Grandma was 40 after or 39 or 40 after Grandpa came home from the war. I didn't realize.
Strangely enough, he was born something like 9 months after Grandpa came home from the war. I think we've kind of figured that one out.
Yeah, when I was talking to Marietta, she told me that her and him were born within months of each other.
Oh.
Yeah, she's one lives in Illinois. And
I just always thought he was born right in sequence with you guys. And
no.
No, he's a war baby.
Yeah, war baby.
Post-war baby.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't know. Frank, do you remember back when he was in the war, in the army and the war, we used to set up there on the bank at the junction of 6 and 63 when cars would be driving through there, and there'd be hitchhikers, there'd be sailors out there, sailors and soldiers, they're out there hitchhiking.
Yeah, we yell at them, pick them up.
People drive by and we'd say, "Hey, stop and pick up the soldier," and they'd put on the brakes and come back and pick them up. Yeah, we used to have fun out there. We helped a lot of guys get rides.
Levon just said,
Then one day there was a truckload of prisoners of war went through, Germans, and boy, did we give them the raspberries.
Well, I remember do you ever remember going to the cheese factory in Toledo with Dad?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, in Toledo, they were growing sweet corn or something. They had a bunch of prisoners of war that were in Toledo.
Oh, did they? Oh.
Yeah, I remember that briefly. I don't remember much about it, but I do remember it briefly. And I remember being at the cheese factory with Dad. I don't know whether we were delivering mail or whether no, he didn't deliver mail to houses. Well, he must have been buying cheese.
Well, he used to go to the post office, and I think he just stopped in there because he always remember we'd get that cheese that squeaked when you chew it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he told that mail he had a contract job. He didn't work for the post office department.
Yeah.
He had a contract with the post office department. He had it before the war, and then after the war, he came back and he bid it again. And he told me once, he was making big money back there in 46 and 47. He was making $4,000 a year. But that wasn't bad wages. We lived pretty good. I mean, we were.
When did he haul the ice route? Was that before he went in the army?
That was way before. That was before he went in the army, 40, 41, back in those days.
I remember once I was with him delivering ice, and I made this deal and I was so proud of it. There was this little girl there, and I traded my chewing gum for her all day sucker. Both of which had been used. I thought I made a pretty good deal.
Tom, that's okay. That was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Well, back when Dad was delivering ice, we'd go with him, usually only one of us at a time, because he had that old Model A panel truck.
Yeah.
And there was only 2 seats in it. And when he was chopping the ice with the ice pick, we'd get to hand out the chunks of ice that fell off. And in the summertime in Iowa, if you could hand out ice to other kids, that made you very, very popular.
"You were somebody."
Because there was no such thing as, very few people had electric refrigerators where they made ice. So, and also there were 2 ice companies in Tama. There's one of them that cut the ice out of Cherry Lake.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and Cherry Lake dumped into Shit Creek.
Oh.
Remember the one that run by the paper mill?
Yeah, right.
That was called Shit Creek. And
Yeah.
that was aptly named. And Dad, he went up to Marshalltown.
Marshalltown, yeah.
He bought
Clean
the ice from ice making. So his advertising and his thing was clean ice. Because his was made with fresh water from the ice making facility instead of cutting out of a dirty lake. So.
Oh yeah, and Don and Frank and I, we helped with the war effort too, and they had paper drives. And we'd go around and pick up all the paper and haul it down to the paper mill, and we load our pockets with rocks and everything we could that was weighed a lot. And when we'd go in, we had all that weight, and then we'd jump off and we'd empty our pockets and then walk out. So
yeah. So we're going in with rocks and
so we were helping the war effort.
Mom never caught on. We'd go back to the back end of the paper mill. There's big piles of paper. And we jump out and hunt through all the piles of scrap paper trying to find comic books. Any comic books we could find would be new because we hadn't seen them. So we walk out with them, tell Mom, "You go ahead and take the car out. We're going to walk out." Of course, they were buying the rocks, and us boys the same. She probably got $5 for the whole carload.
Yeah.
Because we had this old taxi cab, old 36 Dodge. It was a taxi cab that never got repainted. And
Seriously, Grandma drove an old Dodge taxi cab? I didn't know that.
well, it wasn't a taxi cab. It was our personal vehicle. But Dad
No, I
bought it from
understand.
the taxi company,
But I mean,
and he didn't get it painted, so it was red and black and had taxi on the side of it. But it was our personal vehicle. It wasn't a business cab.
Yeah, I just meant the fact that it had never been repainted. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Hey, well, you
Well-
know, the Varnums, they were a little bit, didn't want us to waste money.
That's
Well, you
right.
know, when Dad went away to war, why Mom took over the daytime portion of his job, and she was
Yeah.
hauling that mail from post office to post office and train station and all that kind of stuff during the day. Now, Dad used to do it during the night. He'd have to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to make it run. But Mom just
And,
did the day part, but she did her share.
So anyway, if we had too much paper, we'd take the back seat out of the old Dodge. That way we could put more paper in there. But we always made sure that we only weighed going in along with the bricks and rocks. We were little schemers.
Yeah.
I
If
don't,
Mom had known it, she'd have probably whipped our butt and made us go down and give them the money back. But we never clued her in.
Did she ever whip anybody's butt?
Well, she had a little problem. When you got 3 kids, stair steps, trying to catch one of them, let alone get 3 of them. And if something was going on, it was usually all 3 of us at the same time. So
Your dad probably told you kids about Frank when he passed some air, didn't he? Did he tell you that story?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
When Grandma Belle was watching us, Dad was in the Army and all that, and so Frank passed some air, and Don started snickering, and Grandma said, "What are you laughing at, Don?" And he said, "Frank let a stinker. Francis let a stinker." And she says, "Donald, there's another name for that. Do you know what it is?" And he said, "He farted." And he said she whopped him across the chops like that and rolled across the floor a little ways.
And the part of the story I never really heard is, what was the word she was looking for? What would have been okay?
he passed gas.
I think she was looking for he passed some gas or passed air.
Yeah, she was telling me one time one of her stories when she lived in Chicago and she worked in Grandfather Clark's office when he was married to his second wife. And then his second wife died and she married him because she was, well, let's see, 1846 to 1871, that much difference in their ages. And she was telling about she lived in some apartment house or boarding house or whatever, and there was washing machine was in the basement or something, and they were down there, and there's some Polish or Czechoslovakian woman down there, and she's the water on the floor, and she said to her, "Looks like somebody urinated down here." The woman said, "Urinate nothing, dot me piss."
She grew up, she was a personal friend of J.C. Penney, the guy that started the chain, the J.C. Penney line.
He came from the same town she did in Missouri.
Yeah, and he owed her 50 cents. He borrowed 50 cents from her when they were kids. And she said, he still owes me that 50 cents and he never paid me back.
let's see, with interest,
Well-
that would be,
Well, he's bankrupt now, so.
Yeah, she'll never get it, will she? I guess we can take that off our list of the things we've got in the heirs and
Another bad debt.
legacy.
Who was it that was personal friends with J.C. Penney?
Grandma Belle,
Grandma Belle, okay,
yeah.
in Chicago.
Well, no, this was when they lived in Missouri. She came from Missouri.
Oh,
She
okay.
came from a small town someplace in Missouri. Her
Tuttle.
maiden name was
Tuttle. Her maiden name was Tuttle, yeah.
I'm just kind of saying, we got people that go way back. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, we got people go way back, but I think Joseph Bradley and James Mitchell were both in the local militia in Massachusetts before the Revolutionary War started. And I think Joseph Bradley was in the Revolutionary War also, but not as a general. He was an officer. Because Varnum, our great going way back, William, that was a patriot, I think he served in Bradley's regiment or something, Joseph Bradley Varnum's regiment. I saw that on the documentation for the DAR. We were also fortunate to have our Tom and my great-grandfather and great-grandmother both had grandfathers that were Revolutionary War patriots. Her name was Elizabeth Kimball Varnum, and there was, I think, Isaac Kimball or Kimball that was also from New Hampshire, and he was in the Revolutionary War too.
Joseph started out as a statesman up in Drake or Lowell, Mass. Right.
Yeah, he was local politics.
Yeah,
and then he went on
up there
to the legislature when they formed the government. And you got to remember, when these guys were young, there wasn't a state government. I mean, there was colonies, but there was no federal government. So
well, Joseph, when
he was the United States.
Yeah, when Joseph was a teenager, he used to jump on his horse and ride up on some hill where he could overlook the bay there in Boston and count the number of English ships that were in the bay. And then he'd go back and report it to whoever.
Just so crazy. That wasn't that many years ago.
How many years will it have been?
You know, I said that wasn't crazy, that wasn't that many years ago. You know, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, our family was only 15 years behind the Mayflower or something like that. When did the Mayflower dock in Massachusetts?
It was in
1620?
1620, yeah.
The Varnums got there in 1635.
That's when George got here, yeah.
Yeah, and Kimball got there in 1634, got to New Hampshire in 1634, or probably came through Massachusetts. All of them, I think, came through Massachusetts.
You know, you don't see so much about James Varnum being a general in the war, but he was a really good friend of Nathaniel Greene, who gets mentioned a lot in the Revolution.
Well, yeah, they were both from
up there. And Nathaniel Greene he walked with a limp, and they were ready to take him out of the army, you know, because it didn't look good. He had that limp, and Uncle Jimmy is the one that talked him into keeping him, and he became pretty famous. Yeah,
well, he must have known that Marquis Lafayette too, because he gave him that little punch bowl. Marquis Lafayette gave James Mitchell Varnum that punch bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Pictures in the book, and it's up in the house in Rhode Island. Didn't you see it? Remember it? It's upstairs.
I don't remember it. No, I remember the house, but I don't remember the punch bowl.
Oh, yeah, the punch bowl's upstairs on a shelf. Well, did we ever tell you about our next door neighbors there in Tama?
Tell it again, even when we've heard it. Go.
Fred Guy and his wife, and they had 2 daughters. And he was the head guy on the draft board in Tama. So when Dad got drafted, why those 2 girls come over and my daddy made your daddy go to the army. We probably beat him up because we didn't like that. But they had about a 36 Ford sedan. The driveway was on a pretty good slope. It was a little narrow cement driveway, just about a foot wider than the wheel track on the Ford. And Mrs. Guy used to back out of that garage, and she couldn't back up straight. She'd have it up one bank and then off the other bank. And she had her 2 daughters on one side yelling at her, and us 3 boys on the other side yelling at her. She'd get so frustrated. Remember that, Tom?
Oh, yeah, right.
She'd get so frustrated that car was clear up on one bank, then on the other bank.
I remember
It'd take her a half hour to get 500 feet from the garage down to the street.
I remember Grandpa telling me he'd being bitter about being drafted because he was, in his 30s and had 3 kids, 3 young boys at home, and where so-and-so or across the street didn't get drafted, and he was only in his 20s and single. I remember he was kind of upset about that.
Another thing they did back then is when Dad got drafted, they were drafting people in their 30s, getting anybody they get. They also drafted boys out of high school. If you hit 18 and you were still in school, you got drafted.
Wow.
And then after the war in 46 and thereabouts, these hardened veterans trained killing veterans came back and started going back to finish their high school, get their diploma. Then all the old ladies didn't like it in town because put these trained killers into school with their little girls going to high school. But hey, there wasn't nothing they could do. They didn't ask to get drafted. They got drafted.
When Dad came back, I don't know if you remember, we used to sell comic books down there in front of the house, Frank.
Yeah, yeah.
And Dad came back and he got the biggest kick out of this. He said, here we had this table set up. We had all the comic books on there and the prices were 2 for a dime with covers and 2 for a nickel without covers.
Yeah, we were business people.
Entrepreneurs.
Were those the comic books you stole from?
Yeah, that's the ones we stole from them.
Yeah.
Value-added reselling.
We're tying all these stories back together.
And also, like we've talked about, Dan, your dad and I were pretty mechanical. We used to overhaul our bicycles all the time. We went down to the hardware store downtown, and they had a little cabinet there, one of them steel cabinets with drawers with sections in them, pull-out drawers. And one drawer would be just coaster brake parts because they all had new departure coaster brakes. And we'd tear all them bikes apart, tear the coaster brakes apart, buy the parts we needed, and take them home and put them back, put the bicycles together.
No.
But I'm sure your dad told you about building bicycles, all that, putting them together. And
Oh yeah.
Well, I do
Definitely.
remember completely
we
tearing my
couldn't
bike apart.
afford to buy a new one or even buy a used one. We had to buy parts or pick up junk parts, whatever you could get. And
I do remember when I was 14, completely tearing my bike apart and then having Dad help me put it back together again because I couldn't do it myself.
well, I'm still doing that now.
Was that your rag bike?
It was my first rag bike, yeah.
The green J.C. Penney's bike.
That's right. That's the one.
I had the red version of the same thing.
Yep.
And then we got our first car was a 1931 Chevy. And,
Oh, yeah.
and Grandma Reisler had a white wooden fence around her house. And we went down and painted that fence, and she gave us the old Maytag motor that came on her wash machine when she bought it. Because after we got electricity, she put an electric motor on it. So we took that wash machine engine and made our battery charger out of it. We nailed it on a 2x6 and nailed a generator on the other end of the 2x6 and then put a belt between them and charged up we'd fire up that old Maytag 2-cycle engine and charge the battery on our old Chevy.
Remember when we ran it in the ditch out there and laid it down on the side, Frank?
Yeah, and the guy pulled it out, and
Yeah.
the only thing it did was crack the windshield, so
Yeah.
it didn't hurt
Yeah.
the running any.
No harm, no foul.
Didn't you guys get arrested? You were little kids and the police came to the
Oh,
door.
yeah. The guy had
Yeah.
this old farmer. He wasn't a farmer. He had about a half acre in town there, and he'd grown some corn. He had the corn, I don't know what you call it. He bundled it up and made,
Shocks, corn shocks.
yeah. And we were crawling in them, and I guess we knocked one over. He called the police. And this was during the war. And this old cop come out there, and he had a Model A coupe with a rumble seat. And he was going to put all 3 of us boys in that rumble seat and close the door and haul us downtown. Grandma Varnum come out of that house. Hey, what do you think you're doing with them boys? She chewed his butt out. He opened up the rumble seat door, kicked us out again, forgot about going downtown.
Yeah, he didn't want to mess with Grandma Belle.
No, she chewing him out, yelling at him, chewing him out, right? She'd probably stand on the front porch and chewing him out something terrible. So he gave up on trying to haul us. I don't know what he'd done with us when he got us downtown. Called Mom to come and get us, I'm sure, kicked us out again, and we walked home.
I had a paper route, and that was when we were going to the Catholic school. And I got stuck staying after school. I got into trouble every day. I'd get stuck, and the teacher would have, the nun would have me dust the erasers and dust under the desks and all that. And I don't think I ever got out of school on time. And the only time I ever got away was when I had a paper route, and I'd hear the train whistle blow, and I'd say, "I gotta go now, sister, the papers are in." And she'd say, "Okay, Tommy, you can run along now." Every day I stayed after school.
Tom, did you take the trip to Chicago with us from the newspaper company?
Sure did, yeah.
I was telling Dan about that. We were what, about 9, 10 years old?
Yeah, it had to be. Yeah, I know I wouldn't have been 10. I was 11 when we moved onto the farm, so it would have been
yeah, you
10.
9 or 10. Anyway, we delivered the Des Moines Register and Tribune. The Register's morning paper, Tribune was the evening paper. And they had some promotion where they hauled all us, a whole bunch of paper boys, to Chicago for 4 days. We got on the train and rode first class on the train to Chicago and stayed at some hotel in Chicago, and they served us food on the train and in the hotel. And we rode the old steamboat across the lake to amusement park and went all over Chicago. That was a hell of a
We were right on the coast there, right on Michigan Avenue. And
right.
Forget the name of the hotel. It was one of the real class hotels there.
And then we rode this old boat, steamboat. It had a steam. I remember that big old steam engine was in the center of the boat. The big connecting rods and crankshaft were exposed. And we rode it across Lake Michigan to someplace where there was amusement park.
Yeah.
So we spent the day there. But for young boys like that, and this had to be 46 or 47, because it wouldn't have been during the war.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, they used to have promotions like that, you know.
Yeah.
You'd get 10 new subscriptions. Probably took about 10 new subscriptions to get that trip. But what we do, we just sign up until we got the trip. As soon as we got on the trip, then we'd cancel the subscriptions. Also, we got a new bike that way too. Brand new bicycle. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that only
Columbia bicycle, which was one of the big names in bicycles.
Yeah, I think that only took 3 or 4 subscriptions.
Yeah.
So all 3 of you did this trip to Chicago?
I think all 3 of us did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And just think about how old were you, Tom, in 47?
I was 11.
And your mom and dad didn't go. It was just you 3 boys.
No, mom and dad didn't.
Hell, I think there was
probably. I think, Tom, if I remember, I think we took the trip before Dad got home, because he didn't get out of the Army till in 46. So I think it was early 46 when we took it. Because
that could have been. Yeah.
So Grandma was just glad to have you guys gone for a week.
Grandma had some quiet time.
Oh yeah,
some quiet time.
There
she had a problem too.
There were hundreds of us on that.
Papers while we were gone, and the and stayed and delivered the papers.
Yeah,
there were hundreds of us on that train, and how would you have liked to have been a chaperone on that? Oh man, I wouldn't have had that job.
Now I will tell you, when I was in 6th grade, because I remember Dad coming to school and telling me this, it was and in front of everybody. But I sold enough subscriptions with the Ames Tribune that I won a trip to Dallas over Thanksgiving one year when I was in 6th grade. And so, I would have been, what, 6th grade is 12?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 11 or 12.
Can you imagine a newspaper company or anybody like that taking, like you guys, 9, 10, and 12, 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds?
A whole trainload of them.
We had the whole damn train.
Nowadays.
Did you go, Dan?
Think of that happening.
Dan, did you go to Dallas?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
See, we were in junior high by then. We'd kind of lost track of you.
We didn't.
It was over Thanksgiving, and one of my memories of it is quite frankly, that was the time that I learned what a rubber was.
Enough said.
And how old were you,
How did
Dan?
you learn this, Dan?
Some guy brought one along,
I'm
and
trying to keep this PG-13.
yeah, no, some guy brought one along, and they were all joking about it, you know, and I was like one of the youngest guys on the trip, but they were all joking about it and laughing about it and everything, and somebody blew it up or whatever, and it might not have been for another year or two later, but before I actually figured out what it was, and what it was. I mean, I had no clue, but
They're
that's
still talking about you.
When we were on this trip to Chicago,
that little kid that was on that trip with us.
when we were on this trip to Chicago, one of the places we went to was a zoo. And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, Frank, I heard the damnedest growling going on, you know, and I thought, man, that's got to be lions or tigers or bears, something. And walked around and finally saw here was a couple of giant sea turtles procreating.